Betsy Dirksen Londrigan, Rodney Davis. You're watching a Your Voice, Your Future debate live on Newschannel 20.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm John Hanson. Welcome to the third and final debate for the Illinois U.S. 13th Congressional District. Tonight's debate sponsored by Newschannel 20, the League of Women Voters, and the Hoagland Center. Now, this debate is taking place in the Hoagland Center for the Arts to follow recommendations from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as to follow social distancing guidelines. There is not a live audience here with us tonight. The only people in this building are the candidates, myself, the timers from the League of Women's Voter, and limited production crew and staff from each candidate. And tonight we'll be speaking with Republican incumbent Congressman Rodney Davis and his challenger, Democrat Betsy Dirksen Londrigan. Thank you both for being here and joining us tonight. Now, both parties have agreed to have 2-minute opening statements and to limit responses to questions to 1 minute and 30 seconds. The beginning order was determined by a coin toss prior to this debate. We will begin tonight with Representative Davis and his opening statement. Mr. Davis, please.
Well, thank you to WICS and all of the sponsors. What you're going to hear tonight are going to be lies, distortions of my record, and attacks on my family. My opponent will say that I want to get rid of your health care and not cover pre-existing conditions. That's not true. I have a record to back that up. And I have a wife who's a 21-year colon cancer survivor. This is personal to me, and it's personal to everyone in their family who has a disease that they never asked for. My opponent's also going to say that somehow my dad and my brother got millions of dollars in government loans and pocketed that money. Well, that's not true. As a matter of fact, I don't have anything to do with their business. But what they did was just like 5 million other small businesses. They took advantage of a bipartisan program called the PPP and saved 300 jobs in this district. She's also going to say she doesn't take corporate PAC money. Well, maybe during the commercial break, you might see one of the attack ads leveling dishonest attacks at me that's paid for by her allies and corporate PAC funding. But what we won't hear tonight from my opponent is about her health care plan. It's going to cost hospitals $800 billion and close 39 rural hospitals, many right here in central Illinois. What you're also not going to hear from her is that a recent ad that was put forth was proven yesterday to be a lie, because the gentleman who's accusing my family of stepping to the front of the line never even applied for the program called the PPP. And what you also won't hear is that how her own personal household income rose by millions by lobbying for corporate clients just a few blocks from here in the state capitol, which is exactly why you won't hear that she would join us in asking Mike Madigan to resign.
Thank you. That's your time. Ms. Londrigan.
Thank you. Thank you to WICS and thank you to League of Women Voters for organizing this debate tonight. I'm Betsy Dirksen Londrigan, and I am proud to be the Democratic nominee for Congress here in Illinois 13. I got into this race to protect health care because I saw Representative Davis celebrating on the White House lawn with President Trump, and they were celebrating taking health care away from millions of Americans and gutting protections for people with pre-existing conditions. And I took that personally because I know what good health care means to families. My husband and I have 3 kids. We almost lost our oldest son when he was 12. We spent 21 days with him in the pediatric intensive care unit of our children's hospital. He was read last rites not once, but twice. He was so sick. So I know what it means to have access to good care and insurance. I am in this fight to fight for other families to have the same access to quality, affordable care. That is where the fight is right now. It is with representatives like Congressman Davis. Now, Representative Davis has voted 11 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act with no replacement. When he has fact-checked on that, he has continued to double down and lie about it again. So for everybody watching out there, I have asked my staff to provide those independent fact checks. So follow along on social media, and as we go along, we will be offering those independent fact checks as we go, because healthcare is too important for people to be spreading misinformation about. I look forward to a discussion of the issues tonight and how I am going to protect the Affordable Care Act and bring quality, affordable care to every person.
Thank you. Now, the first question that we have tonight this is for both candidates. This question is coming from Dr. Neil Hedman. He's a clinical therapist in Springfield. His question tonight: today's political atmosphere appears more polarized than ever. If you are elected, how would your congressional tenure support national unity and greater political civility? We'll begin this. Representative Davis, your response first. You have 1:30.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the question. Civility matters. I've seen the end result of what this polarization can lead to. A crazed gunman who had political differences with me and my friends who were practicing for a charity baseball game a couple of years ago in Alexandria, Virginia. We were shot at by this gunman who was screaming healthcare as he was firing at me and my friends. That's the end result of incivility. And I've tried to make my tenure in Congress one about working with everyone, one about making sure that I'm the bipartisan voice that I promised the constituents of the 13th District I would be when I first asked for your vote. I'm proud to say that I'm ranked as the most bipartisan member of Congress in the entire Illinois delegation. That's all Republicans and Democrats. And I'm 13 out of 435 in the United States House of Representatives. It's a bipartisan record of success. It's allowed me to address many issues important to Illinois agriculture, Illinois transportation and infrastructure, and also creating a program that allows employers to help pay down student debt of their employees or prospective employees. That's something I promised the voters of this district I would pass into law when I first ran for Congress, and we did it just a few short months ago because of my bipartisan record.
Mr. Davis, thank you. That's your time. Ms. Londrigan, same question.
Thank you. You know, Representative Davis is the campaign co-chair for President Donald Trump and votes with him 91% of the time. If that qualifies as bipartisan, then it really is a sad state of affairs. And he's taken a page right out of the Trump playbook. You know, he recently was fact-checked by KMOV, St. Louis television station. And he was fact-checked because the ads that he is putting up about me are false. Representative Davis knows I have taken $0 from Speaker Madigan or his committees, and he lies about it. He knows that I'm not part of that, but he continues to lie about it. So please, again, follow along, check the facts. It's an independent fact check, because I think that's important. Representative Davis has also failed to stand up to an administration and a president. And it goes beyond, calling out the president when he refers to neo-Nazis and white supremacists as good people. It goes beyond that. It's also about respecting the voters. And he has refused to meet with people who disagree with him politically. And by continuing to lie to people about his health care record, he is providing misinformation, and voters need to know where their elected leaders stand. That's fundamental to our democracy.
Ms. Londrigan, that's your time. Thank you. Now, this next question is directed to you, Representative Davis. President Trump has repeatedly flip-flopped on a second COVID stimulus package, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is pushing to postpone a relief package until after the election. Do you support passing a COVID relief package immediately? And if so, what would it contain?
Well, I certainly do, but I want to address some of the things that my opponent just talked about. We're here in Springfield, Illinois. We're a few blocks from the state capitol. If anybody out there believes my opponent that she has not taken money from Mike Madigan, that's absurd. We know Mike Madigan is the chairman of the Illinois Democratic Party. My opponent has had a joint fundraising agreement with the Illinois Democratic Party. And we here in Springfield all know that nothing gets done in the state capitol without Mike Madigan giving it the thumbs up. He controls the State House. He controls the Illinois Democratic Party. And no matter how many times my opponent tries, she cannot run away from the support she has from Mike Madigan, the most corrupt politician that we've seen in our lifetime right here in Springfield, Illinois. Now, I saw a report today, and it's unfortunate because some of my Democratic colleagues have decided to urge Speaker Pelosi not to move a stimulus bill forward. Many of those same individuals are using their corporate-funded PAC accounts to help fund the campaign of Betsy Londrigan. This is the hypocrisy that we see here in Springfield, that we don't need transported to Washington, D.C. I worked in a very bipartisan way to give us the first 4 bills that we now commonly call the CARES Act, that saved our small businesses,
Mr. Davis, that's
that
your time.
helped to fund our hospitals. That's what the truth is.
Ms. Londrigan, you have 1:30 for a response.
What I want to say is I had some college students text me and they said that they were going to play a drinking game, that every time Representative Davis brought up Madigan or Pelosi that they were going to take a drink. So I'm here to say you guys really need to take it easy because this is going to go on for another 45 minutes. This is Representative Davis's way of deflecting from a disastrous health care record. And what we have seen with COVID has been a failure of leadership. What we have seen is no national plan. We have heard in our president's own words that he knew this virus was deadly. He knew it was airborne and had no plan. And his campaign co-chair won't hold him accountable. What we need is a national plan for testing, for tracing, so that we can get our workers back to work, our teachers back in classrooms, and our students back in school learning safely. The University of Illinois has a great plan in place. They developed their own testing and tracing and protocols. They've tested over 600,000 people. Their rolling positivity rate is less than 1/4%. Students are on campus, people are working. That's the kind of plan that we need to get our economy back up and running.
Ms. Davis, that's your time. Thank you, Ms. Londrigan. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
This next question is directed to you, Ms. Londrigan. With reports of a second wave of COVID-19 beginning to not only sweep the nation, but also sweep the European Union and the other parts of the planet, outside of a stimulus relief package, what do you think the role of the federal government should be in curbing the spread of this virus? You have 1:30.
Thank you. You know, because of COVID, we're doing, so many Zooms with people, but I'm also seeing firsthand the devastation that the virus is causing families. I was over at Union Baptist Church last week passing out food boxes to people. This is where families are. People want to get back to work. They want their students back in school. Teachers are dying to get back in the classroom, but we have to do it safely. And the federal government should be investing in ramping up our rapid testing capability and our tracing so that we can have a plan like the one that they're using at the University of Illinois right now that allows us to figure out when there's, where there's a spike, what happened, allow people to quarantine, and make sure that we are doing this reopening safely. But the point is, we really want to be able to reopen. And, in addition to the stimulus, I think were the words you used, but I think it's really important to point out that people are out of work through no fault of their own. This happened to us. And the fact that Congress cannot get itself together to pass an extension of unemployment insurance, to make sure that money is getting back into people's pockets, It is shameful, and we have to
That's
do
your
better.
time. Thank you, Ms. Londrigan. Mr. Davis, your response?
Well, our biggest fight right now, not just here in the 13th District, but in the United States, is fighting this disease that no one on earth knew existed a year ago. And I thought we came together in a very bipartisan way at the beginning of this pandemic to ensure that we paid for not just increased testing and the ability for our public health departments, as I was told by the Champaign County Public Health Department representative yesterday, that they're using the CARES Act dollars that we put in place months ago to have one of the best contact tracing programs that we've seen. These are the things that we did early on when we didn't know much about COVID-19. We need to come back together to make that happen. And it's unfortunate that the COVID response has gotten caught up in partisan politics and polarization in Washington, D.C. We have opportunities to be able to work together, and we should be back in D.C. voting on a plan to allow for things like the FDA approval of the University of Illinois' testing modalities. That's a program that has been working wonderfully. And I'm advocating on their behalf with the Trump administration to give conditional approval so that we can expand that. But we've got a lot more to do. And it was a bipartisan failure before this pandemic that America wasn't prepared. And I will never let that happen again.
That's your time. Thank you, Mr. Davis. We're going to move on from COVID now, and we're going to move to a new topic, healthcare, a very hot topic in this area right now, I know for both of you as well. So this first question actually comes from the League of Women Voters. Healthcare continues to rank first as the largest concern for Americans. Tell us about your healthcare platform, and how would you address the healthcare concerns of your district and its constituents? Mr. Davis, we'll start with you on this one, a minute 30.
Well, number one, Betsy and I both agree that we have to fix broken parts of the Affordable Care Act. The current system is leaving 60 million Americans behind. We have 29 million Americans that still don't have health care coverage. And we have another 31 that can't afford to use the coverage they have. The promises that were made to the United States of America and everybody here when the Affordable Care Act was put in place were that average family was going to save money in premiums. That's not true. It didn't happen. So what do we have to do? We have to make sure that we protect the health care plans that most Americans have and enjoy. That's the employer-based health care plans. And let's focus on making sure that we can protect pre-existing condition coverage for every single American. It's amazing that we continue to get attacked when there's bipartisan consensus in Washington, D.C. to protect pre-existing condition coverage for every family. These are opportunities where we need to start looking ahead. Her approach is a government approach. That government approach is what has driven costs up for healthcare in this country to where those 60 million people can't get the coverage they need or use the coverage they have. It's time to look beyond the plans that Betsy supports that would close 39 rural hospitals and devastate our rural communities when it comes to healthcare access.
Mr. Davis, that's your time. Ms. Londrigan, that same question to you.
Thank you. I got into this race to protect the Affordable Care Act and all of the essential health benefits that go along with it. Representative Davis has voted 11 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act with no replacement, which would gut protections for people with pre-existing conditions and eliminate all of the essential health benefits that go along with it, which means insurance companies could put the annual and lifetime caps back on. It means that women could go back to the dark ages of simply the act of being a woman, being a pre-existing condition. And we are not going back. Now, I know that there are parts of the ACA that don't work for everybody. We need to address some of the costs. And actually, the House did pass a bill called the Affordable Care Enhancement Act, directed at reducing some of those costs. Now, Representative Davis voted against that too. That's not a surprise, because he has been on a crusade since he arrived in Congress to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And he just might get his wish, because 1 week after Election Day, on November 10th, the Supreme Court is going to hear the case to completely overturn the Affordable Care Act. Now, the Trump administration has been supporting this, and he actually voted to support it 3 times. We have to elect people who are committed to protecting our care. That is why I got into this race.
Thank you. Thank you both for those answers. Ms. Londrigan, this next question is for you. You've said that you support a universal health care system. To this point, the concern over costs and care have prevented such a system from coming to the United States. How would you pay for that system, and what impact would your policy have on those current health care plans that voters already have?
Okay, thank you for that. When I talk about universal health care, meaning every person has access to health care, my priorities have always been clear. Number 1, we have got to protect the Affordable Care Act and all of the essential health benefits that go along with it. This is what we rely on. It is not perfect, and I know that, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You get to work fixing it. And one of the ways that we can help fix it is by lowering the cost of prescription drugs. We need to allow Medicare to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Now, Representative Davis voted against that. He's taken over $200,000 from big pharma corporate PACs, voted against lowering the cost of prescription drugs. We have to elect representatives who are listening to people in the district, because I've put almost 100,000 miles on my car getting around this district, listening to people, and I can tell you this: it doesn't matter if somebody votes red, blue, green, purple. They want their prescription drug costs lowered, and we can get that done. And we also need to introduce competition back into the market, and by working with hospitals to identify a Medicare option together that will maintain an excellent standard of care, we can do that too.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, your response to that?
Well, I'm glad prescription drug coverage and cost has been brought up, because as a matter of fact, for the last 2 years, we've seen Medicare Part D premiums go down. That means we're doing something to reduce the cost of prescription drugs, but more needs to be done. That's why I'm proud to work with this administration, where we've seen more generic patent approvals for new drugs to go into the market to continue to lower the cost of prescription drugs faster than we've seen out of the last 2 administrations. Now, the bill that Betsy says I voted against, I did vote against that bill. You know why? Because the Congressional Budget Office said if that was implemented, we would have 15 less cures for diseases in this country. I'm not going to stand for that. I voted for our bill, the Lower Cost, More Cures Act, that was going to continue down a path to lower prescription drug prices. It's ironic that my opponent wants to lower prescription drug prices when her own personal income in her household is funded by lobbying for corporate big pharma clients, a couple that have raised the price of arthritis drugs and opioid recovery drugs upwards of 600%. It's the type of hypocrisy that people in this district are not going to stand for. These are the types of things that I'm going to continue to focus to fix in a bipartisan way. But the plan that my opponent...
Mr. Davis, that's your time. Ms. Londrigan, I'll give you 20 seconds to respond to that statement from Mr. Davis.
I think we need to go back to civility in politics and understand that Representative Davis is going to continue to lie to me, lie about me, and lie to voters. He wants you to be distracted from the fact that he took $200,000 from Big Pharma and voted against lowering your drug prices, and that he is going to continue to distract from his disastrous health care record.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, you have 25 seconds in response.
Well, thank you. It's disappointing that once again my opponent tries to run away from the facts. The facts are the plan that she supports to fix the broken healthcare system that we need to fix is one that independent fact checkers said would cost our hospitals $800 billion and close 39 rural hospitals. Now that means communities like Monticello and Clinton, Taylorville, Hillsborough,
That's your
Staunton.
time.
They're not going to have those hospitals anymore.
This next question, Mr. Davis, is directed at you, and obviously this is a big concern, been a big topic already at this debate tonight. Now, you voted to repeal Obamacare as recently as 2017, but since then the Republican Party has not produced a viable replacement plan. Now, why not? And if the vote to repeal Obamacare came up again, would you vote the same way without a plan in place? You have a minute 30.
Oh, I've always said that we need to fix the broken parts of our healthcare system, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are plenty of good parts of the Affordable Care Act. Essential health benefits, pre-existing condition coverage being part of that, no lifetime caps. Let's make sure we can allow people who may be up to age 26 to stay on their parents' plan, especially during the pandemic. But in the end, there are 60 million Americans being left behind by inaction in Washington. Now, I voted for a plan that was a replacement, that protected all of those things I just mentioned. Unfortunately, no matter how many times Betsy says it, it doesn't make it true that those protections aren't there. But we need to look ahead. We lost control of the House on a promise that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats would fix the broken parts of our healthcare system. They failed miserably to do that. I would love to see a bipartisan plan. As a matter of fact, I certainly wish we could be called back to Washington, D.C. tomorrow and pass a bill that I've co-sponsored, authored by my good friend Dave Joyce, that no matter what happens with any Supreme Court any day, that we would not lose pre-existing condition coverage for any American. Speaker Pelosi is the one that sets the agenda and calls us in for votes. I'm asking her to do it. Pass this bill. Don't let Americans believe that their health care can be sacrificed, because you know better.
That's your time. Thank you. Ms. Londrigan, your response to that.
Apparently it's revisionist history night, because Representative Davis has voted 11 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act with no replacement. Again, please go to, follow along on social media and check the facts for yourself. Those are independent fact checkers. We have to protect the Affordable Care Act. We have to protect the essential health benefits that go along with it. The threat is real, because on November 10th, the Supreme Court is going to hear the case to overturn the Affordable Care Act. President Trump just said the other night he hopes they end it. And his campaign co-chair, Representative Davis, has been in lockstep with President Trump all along. He has voted to gut protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Again, please follow the fact checks. This is a really important time for our nation. We have big problems we have to deal with. We have got to get our economy back up and running. We have to get people back to work and teachers back to school, and we have to do it safely. And that means that we have to have protective gear, and we have to have health care. We have to have quality, affordable health care. And Representative Davis likes to talk about the public option. But it's, again, a distraction, because the 11 times he voted against the Affordable Care Act, he voted to gut those rural hospitals by gutting Medicaid.
That's your time. Ms. Londrigan, thank you. Mr. Davis, this is obviously a very controversial topic. I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds more. Mr. Davis, I'm going to give you 30 seconds now, followed by Ms. Londrigan after that. Mr. Davis.
Again, no matter how many times Betsy says that I wanted to get rid of pre-existing condition coverage, it doesn't make it true. The votes I cast were with replacements that would have protected pre-existing condition coverage. I will not gut pre-existing condition coverage for any American. As a matter of fact, my wife, who has a pre-existing condition after her cancer, would probably gut me if she thought I did that.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Londrigan.
Representative Davis has been on a mission to repeal the Affordable Care Act since he arrived in Congress. He has bragged about it. He has celebrated it. And the fact that now he is trying to recreate and rewrite history is dangerous for us, because we need to send somebody to Congress who is going to stand
That's your
up for
time,
our
Ms.
health
Londrigan.
care.
That's your 30 seconds. Thank you. As part of this as well, this next question is directed to both of you. Again, Mr. Davis, you'll be first on this one. A recent bipartisan policy center analysis of Social Security's solvency found that COVID-19 could deplete reserves in each of the Social Security trusts within the decade. What should Congress do to ensure that Social Security, which is a big concern for a lot of constituents here, and Medicare remains solvent? Mr. Davis, Representative Davis, you have a minute 30.
Well, it's a great question. And first of all, we have to stop playing politics and scaring seniors into thinking that people like me are going to take away their Social Security benefits or their Medicare benefits. I want to make sure that the program that they enjoy stays exactly the way it is. And don't listen to all the attack ads. Don't read the mail pieces and think that we're going to reduce your benefits. That will not happen. However, if we don't have Republicans and Democrats come together to prolong the solvency of both of those systems, they're not going to be there for your grandkids or your kids. We need to have an adult conversation and ensure that we can put in place some ideas that I've been supportive of, like putting a means test on Social Security benefits to help prolong that program and save it for future generations so that it will be affordable and given to those who need it. I honestly don't believe Bill Gates would mind giving up his Social Security benefits to increase the solvency date of Social Security. But we don't have that debate in Washington because of the polarization and the incivility that you see in the 24-hour news cycle every day. We've got to have people willing to stand up and say, quit lying to our seniors. And when that happens, seniors need to stand up and demand that their grandkids have access to these same systems. And I bet you Washington will listen when that happens.
Thank you, Representative. Ms. Londrigan, same question to you.
Thank you. You know, I have family members who are on Social Security, and I remember my grandparents when they would receive their Social Security check every month. And I know that those are earned benefits. Those are systems that people have paid into their entire lives, and they deserve to be able to retire with dignity. Now, I am very proud to be endorsed by Social Security Works and the National Alliance for Retired People. And the reason that they support me is because they know that I will fight against any cut to Social Security or Medicare. Now, my opponent has voted for budgets that make cuts to Social Security and Medicare. Again, please follow along on social media and look at the independent fact checks. I worry about Social Security being solvent and how we're going to make sure that it's there for people at the end of their work life. I believe we need to lift the payroll tax cap. Right now, people only pay on the first $137,700 they make. I believe that we need to lift that so that we can make sure that after somebody has worked every day their whole adult lives, that they can retire with dignity. And I will stand against anyone who tries to make cuts to Social Security or Medicare.
Ms. Londrigan, that's your time. Thank you both for that response. We're going to switch topics now away from health care and move on to a very important and a big concern for a lot of people, especially those who live here in Illinois. Now, this next question, it comes from the Women's League of Voters again. The recent tragic events involving George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and Jacob Blake have led to months of protests in support of Black Lives Matter. Do you support criminal justice reform and the allocation of taxpayer funds to bolster community services for those oppressed citizens? Mrs. Londrigan, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, we all were shocked by the video watching George Floyd get murdered on all of our screens. I think the people that weren't shocked were members of our Black and brown communities who have seen violence against their communities for a long time. We have got to do better. And when it comes to how we're going to do better, first thing that we have to do is we have to recognize that racism exists in all of our systems. Now, I was very proud to take part in peaceful protests this summer and listen to 15, 16, and 17-year-olds really raise their voices to address these issues. And we can start with addressing some of the issues with law enforcement, like banning chokeholds, implicit bias training is needed, and adding in some professionals who are trained in addiction and mental health, recognizing that not every 911 call needs an armed response, but we can't stop there. We have to be ready to root out the racism that exists in our small business ownership, in our housing, in our education, in our healthcare system. We have some profound inequities, and COVID has only shined a brighter light on that when we're looking at the death rates among members of our Black community versus white. So I'm ready to dig in, and I'm ready to fight against
your time,
it.
Ms. Londrigan. Thank you. Mr. Davis, the same question goes to you, if you have a minute 30.
Yeah, to answer your question, yes, I'm in favor of criminal justice reform. I helped pass historic criminal justice reform that makes sure, while working with this administration to get it done, the First Step Act, we don't see drug dealers or drug users, petty drug users, go to jail for longer than Jared the Subway guy who was a pedophile. But because of many of the mandatory minimums that were in place before this administration worked with us to pass the First Step Act, that happened too often. So we've seen success. Now, Betsy and I agree. We need to address some of the issues that exist when it comes to inequities all across the spectrum of our economy and our healthcare system. Let's make sure everybody has access. You know, we're in a unique spot when it comes to race relations right here in Springfield, Illinois, the home of Abraham Lincoln. I'm always proud to be able to talk about having the privilege of representing Lincoln's district. But we have to learn the courage that it took for Abe Lincoln to defy what was prevalent at that time and give us the success that we've seen in combating slavery. Teresa Haley, the head of the NAACP, and my good friend and I, we made sure that the United States Department of Interior put the Springfield Race Riot site on the African American Civil Rights Network. We need to learn from bad things happening in the past to make sure that they never happen again.
Thank you very much. Now, Congressman Davis, staying on the same topic, do you believe that systemic racism is a problem in the United States and in the federal government? And if so, what policies would you support to help correct that? You have a minute 30.
Well, obviously, with the tragic death of George Floyd and the others that you mentioned, we know that inequities and racism exists. But what can we do about it? And here's where I want to see bipartisanship. I've co-sponsored the Justice Act. It's an act that was written by Senator Tim Scott, the only African-American Republican in the Senate. That bill in the Senate couldn't even get a vote. They wouldn't even allow it to be debated because they didn't want to give Republican Senator Scott a win on actually putting good policies in place. Now, here's the good news for Illinois. We have systems in place in our law enforcement training centers. We already require more than what the federal government would. I want our bill, the Justice Act, what it would do would equalize out for the rest of the nation what Illinois is doing so well. 2 extra weeks of training for every law enforcement officer in this state that deals with de-escalation techniques, social justice issues, implicit bias training. We're doing things right here in Illinois. And I certainly hope that my opponent would call her mentor, Dick Durbin, and ask him to quit holding up a vote on the Justice Act in the Senate. Let's debate it. Let's make sure that the American people have a chance to hear that Republicans and Democrats can come together to solve this problem.
Ms. Londrigan, your response.
Thank you. You know, during this summer and this fall, I have been listening to members of the Black community from around the district. We've held multiple meetings over Zoom with different topics so that we could hear what is needed so that we can begin the process of figuring out steps that we can take to address it. For example, the inequities in healthcare, as I mentioned earlier. It goes beyond what is happening with COVID, but COVID is shining a very bright light on it. So why are Black men and women dying of COVID at such a higher rate than their white counterparts? Why are Black mothers dying 2 to 6 times more postpartum than white mothers? Why are Black men getting diagnosed with colon cancer earlier and earlier? It goes beyond healthcare, though. It goes into our entrepreneurship and small businesses. You know, a lot of small business owners get their first start by using their home as collateral. There has been a historic injustice and in policies regarding ownership of homes by our Black brothers and sisters. This is where we have to begin addressing these issues, is at the roots.
That's your time. Thank you. This next question, Ms. Londrigan, is directed towards you. Gun violence is a growing problem across your district, across this district, including heightened gun violence in Decatur, new software being installed in Springfield to fight gun violence involving shot spotter technology. Now, if elected, what specific actions do you believe would you undertake to reduce gun violence, and would that include the banning of firearms? You have 1:30.
Well, I come from a family and a community of legal, responsible gun owners, and I am very proud to be endorsed by Gabby Giffords and to work with Moms Demand Action for common sense gun reform. The first thing that we have to do is we have to pass universal background checks, and we need to close the loopholes around internet sales and gun show sales. Now, the House did pass that bill. Representative Davis voted against it. And the thing is, this isn't controversial except to DC politicians, because I have talked to gun owners and non-gun owners in every corner of our district. This is agreed upon, that we need universal background checks, that we need to keep guns out of the hands of violent offenders, domestic abusers, and the dangerously mentally ill. Again, that is not controversial, but we have to have the right people at the table who are listening and representing their actual constituents. Now, I was in Decatur last weekend for an early vote car rally, and I met Shamil Sanders. Shamil lost his beautiful 22-year-old daughter over the summer. So he's started a program, a community outreach program. So we do need legislation that is going to address gun violence, but we need to make investments in programs like Shamil's too.
That's your time. Thank you. Mr. Davis, your response. You have 1:30.
Well, as a victim of gun violence on that baseball field just a few short years ago, I can tell you it's an experience I don't want anyone in this entire country to have to go through. I'm a proud supporter of the Second Amendment. My support was even more ingrained as I was running away from bullets while 2 courageous African-American police officers were running toward gunfire. We've got to do something to reduce the violence in this country. We need to hold everyone who commits a crime with a firearm accountable. The justice system needs to prosecute them. Now, I'm happy to say I've been part of bipartisan fixes for our national instant criminal background check system. We've closed loopholes in Washington. Now, I'm also one to take ideas. I had one of my colleagues, Mike Levin from California, ask me one day, would you support a bill that incentivized gun shop owners to be able to sell safes when a firearm is purchased? I thought to myself, that's just like what I did and my wife did when we bought her first gun. We bought a gun safe with it. Common sense approaches like that, or what you get from the 13th most bipartisan member of Congress. We're willing to stand up and actually put good ideas in place that just don't.
Mr. Davis, that's your time. Thank you very much. We're going to move off from that topic and move on to a new one. Our time is quickly growing short. This next one, Congressman Davis, this question, it comes from Prince Washington, who is a political science student at the University of Illinois Springfield. The nation's infrastructure, including transportation, power, and technology, is falling behind other developed countries. President Trump promised a $1 trillion infrastructure bill, which has yet to materialize. How can you ensure legislation that will strengthen the nation's infrastructure, including in low-income and rural areas? You have 1:30.
Well, thanks for the question, Prince. That's one issue that I went to Washington to address. And I'm happy to say the dysfunction in infrastructure investment on our waterways, our roadways, and our bridges and our rail systems has been helped. But we still have a lot more to do. Now, you don't have to look too far than right here in Springfield, Illinois, where you've seen tens of millions of dollars that I've worked with the Trump administration over the last 2 years to bring back to our community to continue the progress of making sure that the 10th Street corridor goes completely through Springfield. That's when we found the race riot site that is now on the African American Civil Rights Network. These are the types of things that I have focused on as a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and now, currently, as the ranking member of the Highways and Transit Subcommittee. I'm disappointed, too, that we haven't seen bipartisan action with the Trump administration in addressing a $1 trillion infrastructure package. We could have done it. But unfortunately, Nancy Pelosi hijacked even the normal highway reauthorization process just a month and a half ago. And it didn't allow us to do what we did when Republicans ran the House, put a bipartisan bill on the floor and pass it so that our communities could get the revenue they need.
Mr. Davis, thank you. Ms. Londrigan, your response?
You know, infrastructure was an area I thought I could work with President Trump on because it was something he campaigned on all during 2016. We've never seen an infrastructure bill from this administration. What we have seen is the passage of the tax bill of 2017. That's where they put all their energy, including Representative Davis. Now, that tax scam gave 60% of the benefits to the 20% that are the most wealthy in the nation. It was also a corporate tax giveaway. That is not where we need our representatives' energy focused. The corporations are doing fine. We need focus on middle class and working families. And that brings us right back to the work of infrastructure. We need to improve our waterways, our roads, our bridges. But I can tell you this, we have got to make investments in rural broadband, significant investments. This is something we've been talking about for a long time, but COVID has again shined a very bright light on the disparities. We have students in Central Illinois who can't learn, or they have parents have to put them in a car and drive them to where they can find Wi-Fi because they don't have the broadband to support it at home. We have small businesses that can't take online orders because they don't have the broadband to support it. I look at this like rural electrification. We need to make significant investments to bring our rural communities into the 21st century.
Thank you for that. Now, this next question, Ms. Londrigan, is directed to you. If elected, would you support the Green New Deal? If so, why? And if not, why not?
You know, the reason that I don't support the Green New Deal is because I don't believe that it reflects Central Illinois. You know, here in Central Illinois, we're in the heart of soybean and corn country. Our farms are, you know, extensive and beautiful. My own family has a farm over between here and Decatur and Niantic. It's a centennial farm. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are providing our farmers with the resources that they need in conservation so that they can prepare for what's coming down the pike with climate change. You need to look no further than right here in Central Illinois for the effects of climate change. We have seen historic flooding. How are we going to help our farmers prepare for that? By investing in conservation programs that they're already familiar with, they already know about. But we need to do more than that. You know, our farmers and our soil here in Illinois, we can grow anything. We can be the best at capturing carbon by making sure that we're making investments with our farmers in things like cover crops. We can do that. We need to make sure that we are working with them because we rely on our farms for our industry, our agribusiness. It's what makes our economy in Illinois go, and they are a significant part of the solution to climate change.
That's your time. Mr. Davis, your response.
Well, farmers are part of the solution. They have been part of the solution. That's why I'm endorsed by every major ag group, and our farmers are supporting our efforts in this campaign because we listen to them. We've worked with them. But the question was about the Green New Deal. I don't support the Green New Deal because I think it would crush the American economy. It would continue down the path that the groups that support Betsy Londrigan want our country to continue down, that have devastated hundreds of union jobs right here in this district. It's the policies that those groups who support her want to continue to implement that have led to the shutdown, the planned shutdown of the Coffeen Power Plant in Montgomery County and of the Kincaid Generation Plant in Christian County. We need baseload generating capacity to be able to make sure that America is competitive. I want an all-of-the-above approach when it comes to energy. We can do it here in America, and this district shows that we can do it. But America doesn't get enough credit for what we've done to reduce our emissions at levels that were better than what were agreed to under the Paris Agreement. But we can't afford to lose baseload generating capacity like our nuclear plant in Clinton, because the end result is for seniors on fixed income to pay a lot more just to turn the lights on.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. This is our final question of the night. This is going to be a viewer question, and this is intended for both candidates. This question comes from Matthew Wells, who is a political science and legal studies major at the University of Illinois Springfield. Now, again, this is for both of you. This is the final question. Would you support any president who attempts to add more seats to the Supreme Court? If so, what do you believe the cap on Supreme Court should be, or should there be a cap? And if not, what kind of formula, if there should be a cap, what kind of formula do you use to come up with that number? Mr. Davis, we'll start with you on this question.
I agree with Ruth Bader Ginsburg that we should not pack the Supreme Court for political reasons. There's already enough politics in the legislative branch. We don't need that in our Supreme Court. Now, what we can do is pass a constitutional amendment that's going to ensure that the number of justices we have right now remain. I would not support a candidate for president that's in favor of packing the Supreme Court for political reasons. We've already seen what politics has done to the judicial confirmation process. Issues and policies put in place under Democrats just a few short years ago. Our Supreme Court is that third branch of government that shouldn't have to legislate. When we do our jobs in a bipartisan way in the legislative branch, the House and the Senate, we can pass laws. Let's get back to where we can govern together. That's what the American people want. That's what I've done over my 7.5 years in Congress. I've been your bipartisan voice. I've taken on people in my own party on numerous occasions for a wide variety of issues. But we need people who are willing to reach across the aisle and legislate. Unfortunately, packing the court would only discourage that even more.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Londrigan, your response. This is the final question of the night.
Thank you. I don't believe in expanding the Supreme Court. And I know people are scared, and this is a really big topic of conversation right now, because we all feel the urgency around what can happen on November 10th. The Supreme Court's going to hear the case to overturn the Affordable Care Act. And again, President Trump, just the other night, said he wanted them to end it. He wants them to end the Affordable Care Act. And we have a representative who has made it his mission since getting to Washington to repeal the Affordable Care Act, voting 11 times to repeal it with no replacement, taking away all of the essential health benefits that we rely on, including gutting protections for people with pre-existing conditions. So I understand why people are so concerned about the Supreme Court right now, because so much hangs in the balance for all of us. So here's what I'm going to say to everybody watching out there. There are two important dates here in the next couple of weeks. November 10th, when they're going to hear the case on the Supreme Court. But the good news is that we have another date, November 3rd, because you can get to the polls, you can vote, and you can elect a representative who's going to protect your care.
That's your time. Thank you. That concludes the debate portion. We'll move on to closing statements. Each candidate has two. Mr. Davis, we'll start with you. Ms. Londrigan, you'll be next. Mr. Davis.
Well, as I said in my opening statement, you're going to continue to hear my opponent talk about how I want to gut pre-existing condition coverage and take away your health care. It's not true. It wasn't true then, and it's not true now, no matter how many times she continues to say it. I'm there to work together in a bipartisan way to solve problems and help the 60 million Americans who have been left behind by our current healthcare system. So regardless of the politics and regardless of the political dishonest attacks, I'm going to continue to fight for you and for everyone to have access to quality, affordable health care where you and your doctor will make the decisions, not government like my opponent wants. She talked about Medicare. Gutting Medicare would be part of her policy and plan that she supports by $800 billion. That's not helping seniors. She also would close our rural hospitals. Our rural hospitals in this district are some of the largest employers we have in our rural communities. Let's take a step back and think, if somebody's having a heart issue or a stroke, we need those hospitals with their emergency rooms to stabilize those people who are going through a health issue, to get them to another facility. They are part of what makes rural America work. Now, I'm excited to be able to continue to represent you in Washington, D.C. I stood on this stage back in 2012, and I promised to be a bipartisan voice that was going to work on agriculture issues, going to go and fight to bring back dollars for infrastructure projects. You don't have to look further than Springfield, Illinois to see our success. And I'm going to continue to fight to bring down our student debt in this country. I need your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Londrigan, your closing statements.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I want to make sure before we close out here that you all know exactly who I am. I'm a mom who decided to run for Congress to protect health care because I know what your families need. You need access to doctors. You need lower prescription drugs. You need to know that you can get to the doctor when you need to and not worry about going bankrupt because of a medical emergency. I'm a former teacher. I believe every child deserves an excellent public education. I am pro-worker, pro-union, pro-working families. I want to bring those future energy jobs back here to Illinois. I believe in clean air, clean water, and clean land. And I believe we better get busy because our earth is in crisis. I am proud to have taken the No Corporate PAC pledge. I have taken $0 from corporate PACs, and I'm not doing it now or when I'm in Congress. I don't want that money. I want you to rest assured that I am going to Congress to represent you, not corporations or special interests, you. And I am proud to have over 50,000 individual grassroots donors who power our campaign because that is how you return the democracy to the people. I'm a mom who ran for Congress and is running for Congress to protect your health care. I am asking for your vote because this is too important to trust it to someone who has voted 11 times to repeal your care. So together, Let's protect health care.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you to both candidates for this. Thank you at home for joining us for this debate. Again, Election Day is November 3rd. We invite you to go out and vote. If you have a mail-in ballot, you have until Election Day to have that postmark and put into the hands of the postal workers or into your local voting authority. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night. I'm John Hanson.